Well, welcome to all of you guys joining in with us today. We are so glad that you're here, whether you're out at our Northgate campus or Madras campus or at the Sharpsburg campus. So glad that you're a part of this service today. And to those of you joining us online, glad you're joining in. Hope to see you at one of the campuses real soon. We're in a series of messages where we're talking about how to make good decisions. That's something that we said that all of us can admit we need a little bit more of that. And the Bible word for how to make good decisions is just the word wisdom. The Bible tells us that if you've got wisdom, or if you're a wise person, then generally speaking, you're going to make better decisions. But if you lack wisdom, you tend to make, really dumb decisions, which is why we called this series wisDUMB. And the section of the Bible that we've been looking at this whole time is a book called Proverbs. Now, the book of Proverbs is in the older part of your Bible. It's in the Old Testament. And it was written mostly by a king. His name was Solomon. And most people agree that Solomon was the wisest man of his time. Some would even say the wisest man who ever lived. And we said this right at the beginning. If you're not a religious person, you don't consider yourself religious, or maybe you're just not even sure you believe what's in the Bible. Maybe you know what's in the Bible and you're not sure about it, or maybe people just told you what's in the Bible and you're not really sure you buy into it. The book of Proverbs is perfect for you. We've encouraged everybody in this series to read through the book of Proverbs. We're reading a chapter a day and just soaking all that in. And I'll just say to you, if you're not spiritual or religious or whatever, you're not a church person, it's a great book to read because the book of Proverbs doesn't really ask you to believe in anything. It's just a book about common sense about life. Most of the stuff that you'll read in there, I guarantee you'll agree with almost everything in there. It just helps us live life. It gives us wisdom. It's just common sense. It's about making good decisions. It's about how to keep from making dumb decisions. Now, so far, we've been talking about specific areas in life that the book of Proverbs just deals with. And we talked about several things. If you've been with us, you remember them, but I'll just sort of recap it for you. The first week, we talked about discipline. That was the specific area we dealt with. And we talked about how, most things in life, as well as I do, would just go better if we have discipline about our lives. If we put discipline in our lives, we do better. A few weeks ago, we talked about our words, and man, that was huge for a lot of us because all of us can point back to a time when we said something, and words, you just kind of, when you let words fly, you don't even have to mean the words that you say in that moment, but when you just say something, you make that decision to talk when you shouldn't talk or say something you shouldn't say, and there's always consequences to that, and we've gotten ourselves into all kind of trouble because of our words. And then last week was huge for all of us because we talked about anger. And isn't that a huge thing for all of us? I mean, we talked about how anger motivates us sometimes to make a decision. And you know as well as I do, how many times have you ever made a decision in anger and that turned out well for you? Not very often, at least it hadn't for me. Now, here's the thing about all of these different areas that we've talked about so far in this series. All of those things, I would say, they're pretty obvious to you, right? I mean, everybody hears that and they go, wow, that's so true of me, man. If I had more discipline, I'd be better off. Or if I could control my words, I'd be better off. Or, man, if I could control anger, I'd make a better decision. We all get that, right? All of us would agree that we'd be better off, we'd make better decisions. Our decision-making track record would go up if we could put wisdom in all of those areas. We all admit that. My job today, I think, is a little bit tougher than that because I'll tell you why. You don't think you need this one today. Most everybody here listening to me today, watching this, you don't think you need this. What we're dealing with today, you think you're past it. You think you've outgrown it. Today, I'm going to try and talk to you a little bit about how your friends influence your decision making. And as soon as I said that, I already know what a lot of you are thinking. Now let me just talk to a few groups that I know are in the room today. If you're in middle school or you're in high school, listen, I already know what you're thinking. You are so tempted right now to turn me off. And I know we got middle and high school students in the service. I know you want to turn me off because as soon as I said your friends influence your decisions, immediately you thought to yourself, oh, he sounds just like my mom and dad. And I get that. I probably do sound like your mom and dad because your mom and dad has already said to you things like, watch out who you hang out with, be careful, watch out for him, watch out for her because she's a bad influence or he's a bad influencer. You shouldn't give in to peer pressure, right? Your parents have said that. And the reason I know your parents have said that is because my parents said that to me. Don't hang around with this guy. Don't hang around. Be careful. Parents have always said that. My parents said the same thing to me, and guess what? I didn't listen to my parents just like you don't listen to your parents because I was in high school and I was just like you. I was smarter than they were then too. So I get that, okay? But now, I want to say one quick thing to you and clue you in on something. And let me say, if you're a high school, middle school student, you don't have to believe what I'm going to tell you. You really don't. All I'm asking for you to do is just file this away in the backside of your brain somewhere. And then one day when you're like 35, okay, you're going to say this or you're going to think this and you're going to hear that come out of your mouth and you're going to say, oh, that preacher back then, he was right. So just sort of file it away. And here's what's going to happen. One day when you're in your 30s, you're going to be back at your parents' house and you're going to be looking at some old pictures. Or you're going to pull out your high school yearbook and you're going to be thumbing through that thing. And on that day, when you're in like your 30s, maybe if take to your 40s, but on that day, when you look at those pictures, here's what's going to come out of your mouth. You're going to say these words. What the heck was I thinking? You're going to look at a picture and you're going to say, why would I ever think that outfit was cool? And who was doing my hair? What was that about? Or you're going to ask, why did I think that music was good? It's horrible. Or why did I hang out with that person? Why did I go to that party with those idiots and do that? You're going to say that one day. Trust me. And when you say those words, on that day, you're going to realize and you're going to understand that in some way, your friends had an influence in your life. Because the truth is, the reason you wore that, or the reason your hair was like that, or the reason you listened to that music was because you had a group. You had some friends, and they were into it, and you thought it was cool, and they told you it was the right thing to do. And you'll realize on that day, your friends definitely had an impact on your life. Could be a big one, it could be a small one, but they influenced you somehow. Now, let me lay off of the high school, middle schoolers for just a second, and let me talk to the parents. If you're a parent here of a middle school or high school student, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking, thank God, I hope they're listening, okay? You're really psyched. I get that. You're hoping beyond hope that your kid is listening to the preacher today of all days. But let me just talk to you for just a second. See, we as adults, we think we don't need this. Because as adults, I mean, come on. We never think our bad behavior and our dumb decisions have anything to do with our friends because, see, we left that behind in high school. Peer pressure doesn't affect us anymore. We're mature, right? We're past that. We've outgrown it. We're independent. And here's the reason that I know that's what you think. I used to work with teenagers. I worked with them for years. And I had parents in my office all the time. And every time it was the same thing, just a little bit different version. My kid is off track, they would tell me. And then they give me the list, and it's the list of the bad decisions that their kid was making. From he won't keep his room clean to simple things like that. Or it could be as bad as she's sneaking out with a boyfriend or he's doing drugs or whatever. But it was the list. And I heard it all, okay? After they would give me the list of the bad behaviors, it was almost always followed by a single phrase. And even when I say this, you're probably going to be able to finish my sentence. They would go through the whole thing, give me the list, and they would say, but he's a really good kid. She's a really good kid. I just think he's fallen into the wrong crowd, right? In other words, if it weren't for the influence of my kids' friends, we probably wouldn't be where we are right now. And let me just say this. I don't disagree with you. Now, are friends the entire problem all the time? Usually not, but they're almost always part of the problem. I get that. But the point I'm making is this. I have had countless conversations with adults about their kids, more than I can count, that went just like that. I have never had a conversation with an adult like that about themselves. Never. People approach me all the time after church. Adults come up to me and they'll say, man, I'm in a mess. My life is in a mess. I have made some bad decisions. They'll admit that, and they'll give me their list of bad decisions. Not once have I ever had an adult come up to me and say, I have made some bad decisions, and you know what? It's because of these friends I'm listening to. I'm hanging out in the wrong crowd. They're influencing my decisions. Never had an adult tell me that once. No adult ever says that about themselves, what they will always say about their kids. Now the question is, why is that? Well, because we're adults. And we don't think it affects us. We think we're way past peer pressure, or we're way past the influence of our friends. But here's the truth. A really smart guy named Paul, who wrote the majority of the Bible that you read, he has something else to say about it. In fact, he disagrees. Here's what he said. 1 Corinthians 15, he says, don't be misled, because bad company corrupts good character. Now, for some of you, you recognize that phrase because you've heard that phrase before, or somebody's used it, or maybe even you've used that phrase, but you didn't have any idea that was in the Bible. Well, the truth is it actually didn't start in the Bible. It's actually a quote. Paul, the writer of this, he steals a line from an ancient poet of his day, and he actually puts it in the Bible. But here's the point. It's a principle about life, and it basically just says this. It doesn't matter if you're young. It doesn't matter if you're old. We tend to become like the people that we associate with most. Because, see, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of lives that aren't going well, things that are going wrong in people's lives, and if you just watch it and you trace it back, you can almost always trace back to some sort of relationship, some sort of friendship with a foolish person. My guess is if you were to put some real thought into it and you were to trace back all of your worst decisions, the decisions you regretted the most, you would probably find a person, a relationship, somewhere in that line, and they influenced you. It could be all kinds of different things. Maybe it was a bad piece of advice that someone gave you, and it was from somebody you trusted, and they told you this is what you ought to do, and you trust the person, so you listen to them, and it led you down a road, and you look at it today, and you say, I wish I'd never gone down that road, but you listened to some advice. Or maybe it went like this. Maybe you had a friend who made a choice, and you watched them make that choice, and it turned out pretty good for them, and you saw it, and you thought, wow, that turned out okay for them. I think I'll go do that. And so you did, and you made the same choice, but for some reason it didn't turn out as good for you as it did for them, and it went off track for you. Or how about this? Maybe you just went out and you made a bad choice all on your own, okay? You just decided one day to do something, and you just did it. And you had a friend that was nearby, and they watched you make that decision. And they knew it was a bad decision. They saw it coming. And either they didn't have enough wisdom to tell you it was wrong, or they didn't love you enough to tell you to stop. They didn't have the courage to speak up and to say what they knew was true. See, that's why I think Paul starts with this verse, and he starts with a warning. He says, don't be misled. In other words, he's saying, if you think you're the exception to this rule, come on. You are not the exception. And see, neither am I. None of us are. Our close relationships shape us more than we realize, and they shape us probably more than we'd like to admit. So here's the principle we're just going to look at through this whole talk today. It's, again, out of the book of Proverbs, it's chapter 13. It says, if you walk with the wise, you become wise. But a companion of fools, he suffers harm. Now, this is what this reminds me of. Whenever my wife and I go on vacation, a lot of times we like to go to the beach, like a lot of you. And one of my wife and I's favorite things to do when we go to the beach is we like to walk up and down the beach. And one of the interesting things about walking on the beach is it's not really about the walk. And here's how I know this. We never do it alone. I mean, neither one of us ever said this. We're out on the beach and we say, hey, why don't you stay here? I'm going to go off by myself and I'm just going to walk up and down the beach. We don't do that. Walking on the beach for us always is accompanied by an invitation. See, what will happen is one of us will decide and we'll say, hey, come on, walk with me. Come with me. And it's not about the walk. The reason I know that is nobody ever asks where we're going. Nobody ever says, well, where are you taking me? It doesn't matter where we're going. The destination's not important. The point of going for a walk, and this is true for you too, when somebody invites you on a walk, it's most likely a relational thing. It's about conversation. It's about learning with somebody, from one another. Whenever somebody comes up to you and says, hey, come with me and let's go for a walk, It's almost like a code language. It's them inviting you into their relational world. It's saying, I want to talk with you. I want to open up my heart to you, and I want you to open up to me. It's a relational thing. That's the image that the writer of this verse is trying to get us to see. But he's not talking about a walk that lasts for a few minutes. He's not talking about a walk that even lasts for a few hours. He's talking about walking through life with a friend for years, maybe even for an entire lifetime. See, everybody has casual friends. Everybody has acquaintances. But if you're lucky, you wind up with these close friends, with these few close people that you socialize with, people that you invite them into your home, people that you just share deep connections with. These are the people that he's talking about. You walk through life with these people. And the writer is saying that wisdom will tell you, be very careful who you walk with. If you invite wise people into that circle of your life to walk with you in life, guess what? You're going to be a wiser person. But if you let foolish people come into that circle and foolish people walk with you, you're going to suffer. See, almost nobody ever stops and takes the time to ask this question, but it is a really important question. And you need to ask yourself, no matter how old you are, you need to ask yourself this question. What kind of person do I want to become? What kind of person do I want to become? And when you find the answer to that question, you know what you ought to do? You ought to go out and you ought to begin to choose to walk with people through life whose thoughts, whose words, whose actions are that person, the kind of person you want to eventually be. And see, this is different than choosing friends based on personality, based on common interests or talents or things like that. See, the truth is you can walk through life with people that are vastly different from you. I mean, they could be different in age, they can be different in personality and what you like. But if you want to become the kind of wise person that we've been talking about in this series, you'll look past those things when it comes to these relationships. If you want to be a person of discipline, if you want to be a person who speaks words of love and encouragement to other people, if you want to be a person who takes initiative, if you want to be a person who knows how to handle their anger, then what you ought to do is go find you some people who are doing that. Intentionally surround yourself with people like that, because the more you walk with those wise people, the more you'll be like them. And here's the sad part about this. I have watched for years people who will agonize, who will spend time and money and effort on choosing the right doctor or choosing the right lawyer or the right real estate agent or whatever, even a plumber. And they'll spend time and they'll spend research. And almost nobody puts that kind of time and that kind of effort into choosing the right kind of friends. And yet, think about it. Outside of your immediate family, your close family, who do you celebrate birthdays, graduations, and promotions with? Who hangs out in your backyard or out on your deck during the summer? Who's that? Who's at your house watching the game this weekend? When that tragedy strikes in your life, who shows up to the hospital? Who's at the funeral home for you? Outside of your family, it's that close-knit circle of friends. Proverbs 17 says, a friend loves at all times. A brother is born for a time of adversity. So here's what I want to do today. Today, I want to give you some thoughts on this important issue of life, and I want us to get a little bit of wisdom on it. Because my guess is most of us, we just hadn't spent a whole lot of time thinking about it. We just don't. And see, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to kind of approach this almost from the negative side, I guess I'd say. Because, see, Proverbs provides us with wisdom not only about the kind of friends that you ought to be trying to make in your life, Proverbs also gives us some wisdom about who you need to cross off your list. And that's sort of what we're going to look at in just a minute. Now, before we get into that, there's something that I think is real important for me to get clear and just to say right out front. So let me just say it this way. There is a difference between a person who's in your life because you want to have a positive influence on them, or you're trying to love them, or you're trying to serve them, and they're not necessarily that wise person that you want to speak into your life. That's different than a person that you say, I want to walk with this person through life, like the writer of Proverbs describes. In fact, let me just say it this way. If you're a follower of Jesus, you realize we are called, part of what we're called to do is to be like Jesus. And part of being like Jesus means that we make our relational circles wide enough where we can always include people who don't necessarily share our values or don't necessarily share our beliefs. In fact, I don't know how else to say this, and this is going to sound harsh, but let me just say this. If you're one of those Christians who thinks you ought to wall yourself off from everybody who doesn't believe what you believe or think like you think or act like you act, I don't know how else to say it. Frankly, you're a worthless Christian. I mean, you might as well just go on to heaven and make room for the rest of us who are trying to take as many people with us as we can to heaven. I mean, as Christians, what we're supposed to be doing is being in relationship with people who are outside the community of faith. That's who we are. So what I'm about to teach you about relationships, I'm not encouraging you to insulate yourself, okay? That's not what this is about. But at the same time, when you consider who am I allowing to influence me, who am I allowing to influence the decisions that I make, who speaks into my life, who holds me accountable, who gives me strength and direction in my life, those people have to be chosen carefully. And there are certain kinds of people that you know that should not be in that circle, okay? It doesn't mean you don't associate with them. It doesn't mean you don't allow, it doesn't mean you don't love them. It just simply means you don't allow them to be the primary influence in your life. That's what these next few verses we're going to read together are about, okay? It's found in Proverbs chapter 6, and here's what it says. It says, there are 6 things the Lord hates. There are 7 that are detestable to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. I think what the writer of Proverbs is really trying to say here is, man, when you see a person like that, it ought to be like a warning light flashing. It ought to just send warning bells off for you all kinds of places. This is not the kind of person that you need to let into the intimate circle of your friends, that person that is walking with you through life. Now, again, it doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean they don't matter to God. But they should never have the seat of influence in your life. Now, what I want to do is look at them a little bit closer and give a little bit, just a few comments on each one of these things that he talks about. So let's look at them closer. What does it mean for a person, in that first phrase, to have haughty eyes? What does that mean? Well, I think it simply means someone who just has one of those attitudes of superiority, you know? Someone who either says with their words or maybe with their attitude, hey, I have value and you're worthless. Or I'm a winner, but you're kind of a loser. I'm a professional, you're a blue collar. Or I'm educated and you're a dropout. Or I'm beautiful and you're plain. Or I'm married and you're single. Or I'm spiritually mature and you're not. And by the way, you know, you can take those pairs of phrases that I just used and you can flip them around, right? Because, see, pride can go both ways. You understand that? Proverbs 16 says it this way. It says, pride goes before destruction. A haughty spirit comes before a fall. So in other words, he's saying, whenever you decide to attach yourself to a prideful, haughty person, well, you can just know you have attached yourself to a person who's headed for destruction. Someone who is eventually destined to fall. And see, why would you do that? Why would you attach your life and let somebody like that into your inner circle of friends? He goes on, he says, we ought to avoid a man or woman with a lying tongue. And you know this. You can't walk through life with somebody who plays loose with the truth. Or at least not without getting your heart broken eventually, right? Because, see, once truth goes out the window, trust goes out with it. And listen, I'm not just talking about a person who distorts the truth. I mean, it's also pointless for you to be in close relationship with someone who will withhold the truth from you. See, here's what I want. In my closest relationships, I desperately need friends who love me enough to not withhold the truth from me when I need to hear it. I want a friend who, when they see my life getting off track or they see something that's just not right, that they care enough and they're honest enough and they love me enough to say, hey, watch out. That's not a good thing. Hold up. And they'll warn me. Because if you have a friend in your life and they won't tell you the truth because they're maybe afraid that they'll hurt your feelings, listen, that friend is not really much use to you. And the truth is, they really don't love you as much as they say they do. Look at the next phrase. It says, avoid someone who sheds innocent blood. Now, as soon as I read that one, you guys thought, great, got that one covered because I don't have any friends who are axe murderers. Okay, I get that. But this one goes deeper than that. This is far deeper. See, innocent people can get hurt in all kinds of ways. Whenever someone who's weak or powerless gets violated by the strong. And if you know anything about God, if you've ever read anything in the Bible, you know that God hates this. And the writer here is saying you ought to steer clear of people who like to power up, who like to throw their weight around, people who tend to devalue other people, someone who's not moved when they see suffering, when they see the hardships of other people around them, someone who likes to take advantage of other people when they're weak. When you allow people who are like that to begin to speak into your life and to influence you, you're going to become like them, and you're going to eventually lose your sensitivity toward people who are weak or suffering. It's really, the chances of that happening go really high the longer you hang out with people like that. The writer also says, watch out for people who devise wicked schemes. People who, he says, who are quick to run into evil. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's simply the friend of yours that they just don't have any problem figuring out a way to justify things that are a little bit shady, things that are a little bit dishonest. This is the guy who comes up with that business plan that you know, and it's not quite legal, but it's close enough, right? This is that woman who tends to be able to make her expense account at work cover pretty much all of her personal expenses too, right? See, here's the problem. When you let people who are like that inside of your relational circle, okay, and you let them speak truth into your life and influence you, here's what ought to happen. Whenever, especially as followers of Jesus, whenever you and I scheme our way into something wrong, or we plan to sin, or we plan to do something evil, you know what ought to happen inside your heart and inside mine every time that happens? Our conscience ought to be like just sending off warnings. Our conscience ought to be drawing us back. Our conscience ought to lead us. The Spirit of God in us ought to be leading us to repent of that, to feel sorrow for that, and to want to make that right. We ought to always have a very tender kind of conscience when it comes to that. But you know as well as I do, some people aren't like that. Their consciences, they've ignored their conscience so long that they're just numb to it now. And the truth is, you do not want to attach your life to someone whose conscience is numb to the point where they don't have any problem just ignoring it. Because it's not just dangerous for them, it's dangerous for you. Now, the next person on the list, he says, to avoid, it kind of sounds like a repeat. He says, you need to avoid people who give false witness and pour out lies. Now, it sounds like he's talking about the same person we talked about earlier, the lying tongue. But he's actually going a little further on this. He's taking it to a different place. He's pointing out a particular form of lying. He's talking about someone who has a slandering tongue. In other words, when you meet someone who's way too eager to just pass on damaging information about another person, or they're just unable to keep real sensitive information quiet, the writer's saying, you need to watch out for that person, because that person is just not safe for you. See, over the years, I've learned this about people. I've learned that there are some people that I hang around, and they're just not safe. Now, there are people who are safe. There are people in my life that I know I can talk freely. I can say pretty much anything that I need to say, and I don't have to worry about it. But sometimes you come across people and you just don't know, or you wonder, maybe they're just not saved. Or they're people that you know are not going to take information you give them and treat it delicately when it needs to be. They're just real anxious to share things, and they don't really think about the damage that it could be doing to other people. Whenever I determine that I'm around someone like that, or even if I'm just not sure, I almost always keep quiet. Or I'll hold my words a little bit. I'll guard what I say. The writer says, steer clear of those kind of people. And then finally, he wraps it up and he says, beware of people who stir up conflict within a community. And he takes this one real seriously. In fact, look at this other verse. Proverbs 16 says this way. It says, a perverse person is one who stirs up conflict. You ever try to be friends with somebody who just really had a hard time letting go of grudges? Somebody who just had a habit of nursing those kind of things. You ever known someone who always seemed to be needing revenge? Someone who demanded huge apologies, and they had a hard time forgiving, or they just couldn't seem to let go when they were offended. Proverbs says a person like that who stirs up conflict, he says, that person isn't just wrong. He calls that person perverse. And that's a strong word. Why would he use such a strong word? He's saying, look, this is not just a character flaw. This is a perversion of something. Why would he say that about a person who stirs up conflict, who holds grudges, who can't seem to forgive? Well, I think it has a lot to do with this. You know, the Bible teaches us that for those of us who have come into relationship with God through Jesus, those of us who follow Christ, we've been forgiven, right? We have been taken from being enemies of God to people who the Bible says have been reconciled. We've been brought back. In fact, we are now called friends of God. Gone from enemies to now becoming friends. And the Bible teaches us that because of that, our job is we ought to be sharing that message of reconciliation with everybody around us. And whenever you and I decide to hold on to resentment, when we refuse to forgive other people, what we have done is we take everything that Jesus did for us when he went to the cross, when he bore our sin on that cross, and when he forgave us, and when he reconciled us to God, brought us back into relationship with God, we take everything that Jesus did for us and we twist it. In essence, we pervert it with our lives. And it's a serious, serious thing. Jesus said it this way. He said, blessed are the peacemakers. I mean, so who would you rather have on your team? Someone who stirs up conflict? Or would you rather have yourself a peacemaker? Now, let's take all of that, and I just want you to, just for a second, I want you to imagine something. What would it be like if you surrounded yourself with the kinds of friends that the writer of Proverbs just taught us about? What if you walked with people who were humble and teachable instead of people who were prideful and superior? What if you walked with people who loved truth and always spoke it with love? People who used their power to help the weak instead of exploiting people that they can take advantage of and get ahead. People who would lead you to higher standards of integrity rather than helping you try to figure out ways that you can bend the rules. What if you hung out with people who were just safe to bare your soul to? Instead of hanging around people that you're always wondering, are they going to break confidentiality? Are they going to misuse this information? What if you hung out with people whose heart would always want to lean toward forgiveness rather than holding a grudge and keeping offenses? I mean, what if you had a circle of friends that were close and walking with you and they were like that? Doesn't that sound great? I mean, don't you think that's a life that walking with those kind of people, that's a life that's going to lead you to a better place? Isn't that kind of a life going to lead you to the kind of place that God eventually wants you to be? Well, here's what we're going to do. On the back of your connection card today, I want to encourage you to take it out and just look at it, because there are a few next steps that we're encouraging you to take this week. Around here, we take next steps every week. We try to apply what we learn here every single Sunday. And there's a few on there that I'm going to encourage you to take. Right on the left side in that next step box, maybe you need to do what what I would call a friendship inventory. Maybe what you need to do is you need to sit down this week and think about who are the inner circle of my friendships. Who's in there, you know? Am I walking with wise people or am I not? And do I need to reconsider that? Maybe for a lot of you, you've never actually put any thought into it, and maybe you've never actually tried to attach yourself to a small community of wise people. And maybe it's time for you to start doing that. I would encourage you, if that's where you're at, to start seeking that out. And the best place to begin to do that is through our connection groups. You can seek out a small community of people. And now, is everybody in a connection group wise? No. But you know what? You'll find some wise people there, and you can begin to attach your life to them and listen and be influenced by them. And that could be your next step, is say, I'm going to seek out one of those little communities. Now, I'll just say, if you're ready to do that and you're going to do that on your own and you're going to begin the process yourself, just simply check the box on the left-hand side. I'm going to seek out a connection group. But now, if you want us to help you, you want us to be involved in that, I'd encourage you to go to the right side of the box of the connection card and check the connection group box over there, and we'll send you some information, and we'll start that whole process with you, and we'll support you that way. Whatever steps you're taking, I invite you, just check that box on the back of your connection card, and then when the offering comes around in a minute, you can just drop that in, and we'll pray for you, and we'll encourage you. Again, if this is your first time with us, if you're a guest here today, boy, we are so honored. We really are. We're honored you came, and we would really be honored if you filled out one of those cards and let us know that you were here so that we could connect with you this week. Let us know you're here for the first time. We'd love to just thank you. In fact, on your way out today, if you put that in the offering basket, we want to give you something. There's a free book on the information table on your way out. It's just a book that tells the story of the Bible. We think it'll be a help to you no matter where you are in your spiritual journey. But listen, that's all we're asking for you to do today. Just drop that card in the offering. We're not asking you to give any other money or anything else. This service is our gift to you. We really are glad you came. But we said at the beginning of this series, guys, we said, look, that your life and my life, it's just a collection of decisions that you make every day. And I firmly believe that those decisions are just marked by the company that we keep. I believe that. The relationships that we build, they influence our decisions. And see, if that's true, if it really is true, then it just makes sense that we'd spend some time working on this. That you and I would put some serious, adult, mature thought into who walks with us. So I ask you, who walks with you in your life? Who do you allow to speak into your life? Who influences you? I hope that you'll ask those questions, you'll think about them, and you'll take the wisdom that we gain from the writer of Proverbs, and you'll just put it to work to build some friendships where you'll be walking with wise people. Why don't you bow, and we'll pray right now. I'll pray for us. God, thank you that you didn't create us to do life alone. God, you made us relational in your own image, to be drawn toward one another, to enjoy doing life together. Now, God, help us to take the wisdom you offer about our friendships and help us use it so that we can be people who walk with wise people. And God, through that, I pray we become more wise just like you are. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.